can't teach you how to paint, but we can teach you to see more and better.
Pull up at the next telephone box. When we found one, it was on the wrong side of the road with no parking on our side. I crossed the road carefully and made the telephone call to my wife's parents, explaining that there was no way we were going to arrive in time for dinner. Recrossed the road and got into the passenger seat. Silence. I was just about to say, "You all right, Fran?" when another voice, sounding very calm, but perhaps a little frightened, said, "What are you doing in my car?" I apologised profusely, got out and into the car behind, where I found Francis convulsed with laughter. I was planning to make the whole of my talk blind man jokes. Believe me, there is no shortage. But what I actually want to do is talk about seeing better, seeing more, which I suppose in itself is a bit of a joke, coming from somebody who has been going blind for 35 years and has spent the last 10 years stone blind.
The environment provides an inexhaustible reservoir of information. Some men spend most of their lives looking, others listening, and a few connoisseurs spend their time in smelling, tasting, or touching. They never come to an end. The eyes and ears are not fixed capacity instruments like cameras and microphones, with which the brain can see and hear. Looking and listening continue to improve with experience. Higher order variables can still be discovered even in old age. Getting information to the receptors becomes troublesome when the lens of the eye and the bones of the ear lose their youthful flexibility, but higher order variables in light and sound can still be discovered by the artist and musician.
I've wondered long and hard why the paintings I've made since being totally blind are as good as they are. And indeed, quite a lot of people think they're the best things I've ever done. When my sight was relatively normal, I mean, it was never normal, but I could go along to galleries and look at paintings, I think probably I was always a bit on the timid side. I think I was too influenced by the masters I revered. And it's not so much that I was over-influenced by their language, their way of doing it, because I absolutely knew that was a catch. I think what I probably was too influenced by was actually their vision, their experience. And I think that when I went out to choose a subject, in a sort of way, I was choosing a version of Monet's subject, or Bonnard's subject, rather than my own. And when I started going seriously blind, that option wasn't there. And because I was so thrown back on my own limitations, and curiously, I think this led me into a much more personal world. A world that was more my experience and my way of responding to it. When I first went to art school in 1960, I met remarkable painter teachers, notably Dick Lee, Ewan Uglow and Frank Auerbach, who said to me, "We will not teach you how to paint, but we can teach you through the practice of painting and drawing to see more, to see better." And I found that this was true. The idea that art is like a sort of sixth sense, that it is a unique way of accessing more and new experience of reality, not making it up, but actually accessing more of this virtually infinite array of information. And that's obviously why things like, talking about hawks or insects is relevant, just to make people realize, we couldn't see vermin from 3 miles up. No fucking way. So to say there is a way in which hawks see far better than we do, people don't mind that. But if you say artists see better than they do, they don't like that at all.
The human eye evolved over millions of years through
the perceptual learning applied to the perceptual systems made possible through consciousness. This new sort of perceptual learning kind of culminated in Monet and the Impressionists. I believe that Monet was able to access at will, consciously, the whole of his peripheral vision and totally suppress his central vision. And that meant that he could invent a sort of totally ordered coloured pattern which had this astonishing ability to communicate a very convincing and real experience of coloured forms in light and space. But when Monet and the other Impressionists first did this, people thought the paintings were perhaps a joke. Now, why was that? And it suddenly struck me, it's fucking obvious. It's the fact that the punters, who had learnt nothing of this new way of using their eyes and brains, looking for them, carried on being what they were conscious of on the macula. And when they looked at a Monet Impressionist painting, it looked unbelievably crude and unstructured and nothing like looking at things. I have talked to many ophthalmologists who have told me that the average person is completely unaware of losing half their field of vision in an eye until the macula begins to detach.
God, that is fascinating, isn't it?
Whereas, you see, I like to tell my story, that with training, I could detect tiny tears in the periphery of my retina before they could see them with their instruments. The idea, I suppose, which is the most exciting to me, is that you have to invent to see more of the truth and tell it. Isaac Newton said that he saw more by standing on the shoulders of giants. He meant predominantly, I think, Galileo and Copernicus. Galileo and Newton, by inventing better telescopes, and in Newton's case, more importantly, better mathematics, saw more of the truth that was already present. Those telescopes and that mathematics did not exist in the real world before they invented them. But by means of them, they discovered the truth of the heavens, which was always that truth, but nobody had understood it before, nobody had seen it. Now that, to me, is just such an exciting idea. And you see, I want to extend that into the other arts. I want to say that Bach and Miles Davis, by inventing new structures of expressive sound, actually experienced depths and subtleties of emotion which possibly had never been experienced on the planet before them. I mean, it's an extraordinary idea, but I think it's perfectly possible. And I think the same is true of Shakespeare, that Shakespeare's absolutely astonishing ability to structure language in the most ridiculously inventive way enabled him to plumb depths of personality and relationship, which probably nobody had experienced before him. And because they're artists, what they made has, in principle, the power to pass some of this on to us. I mean, it certainly doesn't happen automatically. We've got to make a hell of a lot of effort of the right kind. But even if we can't see what Rembrandt saw, we can, through looking at his painting, see a hell of a lot more than we see when we look at an old woman in a chair. I want to sort of indicate how utterly extraordinary and worthwhile that is. I mean, that experience I had when I was looking at that Bonnard self-portrait really was one of the weirdest experiences of my life. Because I came across that self-portrait in Wildenstein's in Bond Street. I didn't know it. And You know, it was a fabulous painting. And I just stood there and looked at it for an hour more. And at one point, I was just entranced by the little sort of turquoise cap on the glass bottle on the shelf at the bottom, and the brush bristles down, and there's something else on that shelf. There was just something somehow so utterly present and completely convincing about them, and yet the paint they were made of was so delicate and ravishing and non-descriptive. And I just thought, you know, bugger me, this is beautiful. And then my eye caught the piece of blue material in the background, and I moved my attention from the bottle top to the bit of blue material, and I just kept on looking at one and loving it, and then going back to the other. And then for some reason, I just glanced up, and for a microsecond, I got the absolute shock of my life. I just thought, that's not me. That's not what I look like. And I think in that minute passage of time, I had, to some extent, an experience of what it was like to be Bonner, age 72. Extraordinary. It was absolutely amazing. And I want to tell people that because, you see, most people, I think their ambition in terms of what art can offer them is so incredibly modest. And I want it to be very, very ambitious.